"Sir, open the door immediately or we'll be forced to break it down." That was Deputy Harrison's voice booming through a bullhorn as I peered out my cabin window. What I saw made no sense. 3 sheriff cruisers lined up in my driveway, one smug HOA board member standing stiff as a soldier, and a woman in a rhinestone-encrusted tracksuit jabbing her finger toward my porch like she was commanding a battlefield assault. I stood there in disbelief, clutching a mug of chamomile tea, my feet snug in owl print socks, wondering what parallel universe I had just woken up in. Then Harrison shouted the accusation. "We've received reports you're illegally squatting on private rental property owned by Mrs. Linda Garrison." I nearly dropped my cup. Linda Garrison? The name meant nothing to me. I wasn't a squatter. I owned this cabin outright, paid in full, free and clear. So why was half the county law enforcement assembled outside like I was running a drug den? Let me rewind and explain how my quiet Saturday morning turned into a circus. My name's Thomas Brennan. I'm a semi-retired software engineer who's been living here in Cedar Ridge Hollow since 2004. I bought this log cabin back when property was cheap, carved out 3 acres of woods for myself, and worked hard until every penny was paid off 8 years ago. I live simply. I keep the walking trails cleared, watch the stars at night through my telescope, and sometimes let neighborhood kids peek at Saturn's rings. That's been my life. Quiet, steady, mine. Until Meadowstone Estates decided to stick its nose where it didn't belong. See, Meadowstone is a nearby subdivision that's supposed to have boundaries. Supposed to. But when a new HOA president took power, suddenly their jurisdiction started creeping outward. Enter Linda Garrison, self-declared businesswoman, vacation rental mogul, and queen of a gaudy Instagram page called Linda's Luxury Escapes. She looked at my cabin not as my home, but as her next cash cow. The first time she showed up was in March. She came smiling like a politician, binder in hand so thick it could stop a bullet. She told me in this fake sweet tone that my adorable rustic cabin would make the perfect listing for high-end weekend rentals and curated experiences. She actually said curated at least 3 times before I could get a word in. I politely turned her down and even offered her coffee. She sniffed and refused. Apparently my beans weren't organic, fair trade, single origin. That was my first red flag. But Linda wasn't done. A week later, she came back with reinforcements. 2 HOA board members and a folder stuffed with papers she called easement opportunities. She laid out spreadsheets color-coded like a Wall Street pitch deck, complete with Q2 cabin revenue projections. She spoke in that smug, condescending voice people use when they're convinced they're smarter than you. "Thomas, your land is underutilized. With our program, you could generate $15,000 a month in passive income." This time I didn't decline politely. This time I stood firm and told her clearly that my property was not part of her HOA and it never would be, and that was the exact moment when the real games began, because suddenly a sign appeared at the end of my private driveway reading, "Welcome to Linda's Mountain Retreat." And though I took it down the next day, it was back again, but this time stuck on with some kind of industrial adhesive, and soon after strangers began arriving at all hours asking about check-in instructions. One couple even came all the way from Denver with a printed receipt and confirmation email showing they had booked a 3-night stay at my place. And as if that was not enough, one night my plain mailbox was swapped out with a decorative cabin-themed box shaped like a moose, complete with a slot in its back. And the best part was my own security footage caught Linda herself sneaking around at 2 in the morning dressed all in black like some kind of suburban ninja. And when I called the county sheriff, they brushed it off as a civil matter. And when I called the postal service, they told me to file a complaint online. But Linda was just warming up, because soon she had listed my cabin across 7 different rental sites, complete with glossy, professional-looking photos that were not even of my property, showing a hot tub and marble countertops that my place definitely does not have. While the description bragged about mountain luxury concierge service and even wine tastings, she had gone so far as to make fake 5-star reviews under names like Madison B. and Tyler K., claiming it was a transformative mountain experience and then Memorial Day weekend hit. And that is when she went nuclear, because she double and triple booked my cabin to 4 different groups and pocketed $8,000 in deposits. And by Friday evening, when the first family arrived, I had to tell them no, I was not the caretaker. No, they could not come in, and no, there was no welcome basket with artisan cheeses waiting for them, and over the next 2 days I turned away 12 more groups, all waving confirmation emails from Linda's fake hospitality accounts, and I documented everything, every trespass, every fake listing, and sent cease and desist letters through my lawyer. But Linda's response was to go on offense by filing a police report accusing me of being a dangerous squatter who had broken into her rental cabin and refused to leave. She claimed she had owned the cabin for 5 years and even presented fake lease agreements with my forged signature to back her up. Which finally brings us to that Saturday morning when the deputies came knocking at my door. I stayed calm even though my blood pressure felt like it was about to explode. I welcomed Deputy Harrison inside and opened my filing cabinet. I placed my deed from 2004 on the table, then showed him 20 years of property tax receipts, the mortgage satisfaction letter from 2016, my homeowner's insurance policy, and finally the security footage of Linda trespassing on my land more than a dozen times in the last month, including one clip where she measured my deck while bragging on the phone that her yoga platform would bring in $50 extra per booking. Deputy Harrison went from suspicious to puzzled to angry, but none of it was aimed at me. He stepped outside and his voice grew sharp as he told Linda that filing a false police report was a felony, forging documents was another, and taking money for land she did not own was fraud and theft. Linda shrieked that I was not using the space properly and that the community needed her business plan. I watched through the window as she pulled out her phone and tried to go live on Instagram, claiming she was a visionary being persecuted and that the corrupt system favored property hoarders. Deputy Harrison finally snapped and told her she was under arrest for filing a false report, fraud, theft by deception, and trespassing. The look on her face was pure shock. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She tried to argue that she was the HOA president and even bragged about her leadership award from the Meadowstone Ladies Auxiliary while screaming about discrimination against female entrepreneurs. The other board member who stood with her quietly began recording and whispered about holding an emergency meeting to remove her. The video of her arrest hit the internet within hours, and the Meadowstone Estates Facebook group exploded with a post calling her out as the HOA president arrested for trying to steal a neighbor's cabin in Tio. He comments people exposed how she had pulled similar tricks before. 3 homeowners stepped up with stories of her attempts to take over their houses, and one elderly couple explained how she tried to bully them into giving up their property for her rental empire. Actually listed their garden shed as a tiny home, romantic getaway. By Monday, the full scope of Linda's crimes became clear. She had collected over $40,000 in deposits for my cabin alone. She had created 12 different rental listings across multiple platforms. She had forged documents not just for my property, but for 6 others. The district attorney charged her with 37 separate counts, including organized fraud, identity theft, and racketeering. Yes, racketeering, like she was some sort of suburban mob boss. Her Instagram account, Linda's Luxury Escapes, lost 10,000 followers in 2 days. The comments on her last post, which ironically was about manifesting abundance through property wisdom, were brutal. Someone found out she didn't even own her own house and was actually renting a condo 2 towns over. The HOA board held an emergency meeting that Tuesday and voted unanimously to remove her as president. They also voted to ban her from all HOA properties and events in perpetuity. But the best part came during her arraignment. The judge looked at the charges and the evidence and actually laughed. Not a chuckle, but a full laugh. "Mrs. Garrison," the judge said, "you essentially tried to run an Airbnb empire with other people's houses without their knowledge or consent. That's not entrepreneurship, that's theft." Her lawyer tried to argue that she had made improvements to the properties by marketing them, but the judge cut him off. Marketing someone else's property without permission isn't an improvement, counsel. It's fraud. Linda tried to speak for herself, which her lawyer desperately tried to prevent. "Your Honor, I was simply maximizing underutilized resources in a difficult economy. These properties were sitting empty on weekends when families could be making memories." The judge's response was swift. "Mrs. Garrison, you're looking at potential prison time of up to 15 years and fines XA. Ceding $200,000, the only memories being made here are going to be yours in a federal correctional facility." Linda fainted right there in the courtroom, just collapsed like someone had unplugged her. They had to call paramedics and everything. When she came around, she was muttering about her vision board and how this wasn't how her manifestation journal said things would go. The bailiff actually had to carry her out because she refused to walk, claiming her chakras were misaligned from the negative energy of the justice.